One of the most turbulent years in contemporary British politics has just passed. The nation has had 3 prime ministers, has mourned the passing of its longest-reigning monarch, and is currently experiencing a cost-of-living crisis that threatens to engulf the middle classes that support the Conservatives. Rishi Sunak, the prime minister who took control of the tiller, struggled to steady the ship during his first few weeks in office. Truss, his most recent predecessor, caused a nearly unprecedented financial crisis with a careless budget and was forced to resign after only 6 weeks. Boris Johnson, the previous occupant of 10 Downing Street, spent the last months of his premiership tarnishing the institution as he battled a series of damaging scandals. In order to close the enormous polling gap between his Conservative Party and the opposition Labour Party before the next general election, which must take place no later than January 2025, Sunak has emphasized stable leadership and sensible economic policy. Despite the devastation of 2022, one of the most important aspects of Britain's new political landscape has received little attention. On January 1, 2021, the UK officially became a separate entity bound to the EU by a flimsy trade agreement, leaving the EU in all but name. This transition marked the start of Brexit. In actuality, we raised supply-side obstacles for British companies trying to enter the European market. Because it is so difficult and expensive, some smaller businesses have simply stopped doing business with the EU, according to Sam Lowe, a partner at the consulting firm Flynn Global. As a result, costs have gone up for those companies that are still doing business with the EU. On Thursday, April 1, 2021, a truck drives by a British Union flag, also known as a Union Jack, at the port of Dover Limited in Dover, United Kingdom. The implementation of post-Brexit checks on food imports from the European Union has been postponed by the UK government until October 1. In actuality, we raised supply-side obstacles for British companies trying to enter the European market. Because it is so difficult and expensive, some smaller businesses have simply stopped doing business with the EU, according to Sam Lowe, a partner at the consulting firm Flynn Global. As a result, costs have gone up for those companies that are still doing business with the EU. On Thursday, April 1, 2021, a truck drives by a British Union flag, also known as a Union Jack, at the port of Dover Limited in Dover, United Kingdom. The implementation of post-Brexit checks on food imports from the European Union has been postponed by the UK government until October 1. Since the full implementation of the Brexit deal, officially known as the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, both exports of goods and services to and imports of goods and services from the EU have decreased, the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed earlier this year, TCA. The OBR concluded that there is little in the data to suggest that the assumption of a 15% decrease in trade was incorrect since the Brexit agreement was put into effect. The impact, however abstract it may sound, has been vegetables left to rot and fish dumped back into the sea, because British exporters missed the limited opportunities to get their goods into the EU. Brexit has exacerbated the cost of living crisis from an import perspective by raising the price of some foods. The effects of Brexit extend beyond the economy. The Northern Ireland Protocol, which is a key element of the Brexit agreement reached in 2019, is still causing friction between the UK and EU. The Unionist and Republican powers-sharing agreement has broken down as a result of the UK's partial implementation of the protocol, leaving Northern Ireland without a functioning devolved government since February. These tensions put the Principality in a precarious and possibly dangerous situation, given the recent history of Northern Ireland. On December 10, 2019, while attending a general election campaign event in Exeter, Staffordshire, Boris Johnson drives at JCB with the words, "Get Brexit done" written inside the bucket. In a normal situation, the government and opposition would be working quickly to address the issue that is causing such severe economic and social harm. Brexit, however, is still anything but normal 6 years after British citizens decided to leave the EU. Both major parties continue to believe that it serves their interests to avoid discussing Brexit in any real detail. According to Rahul Rupal, a former special advisor to the British government and leading authority on Brexit, the Conservative Party doesn't see any benefit in engaging in discussions that highlight the problems with the deal they negotiated and supported. As for Labour, they most likely won't be able to win a general election if people believe they have a hidden desire to rejoin the EU. Any Brexit-related policy that appears soft will expose them to criticism, he warned. To make Brexit work, Labour leader Keir Starmer has proposed a 5-point strategy. However, the plan is crystal clear that neither Labour nor any of its satellite institutions have any intention of rejoining the EU. While many Labour members find this upsetting, allegations of Europhilia and covert plans to undo Brexit could undo all the work Starmer has done to move the party closer to the presidency than at any time in recent memory. An important factor in Johnson's resounding victory in 2019 was the support of the Conservatives in former Labour strongholds from Brexit supporting traditional Labour voters. To put it simply, Starmer needs those votes to win. The top figures in British politics are in this bind as they get ready for the next election. There are areas of Brexit that could be improved, and compromises with Brussels can be made. However, no one wants to ignite the political issue that is the most explosive in recent memory, for fear that it will blow up in their face. Critics assert that this inaction results in a nation without a long-term sense of purpose or direction. As a nation, we still don't have a plan for where we want to go after Brexit, claims Rupel. From what sources do we perceive growth? Will we make a conscious shift to the global market or stick with the European markets closely? What advantages do we have? Do we position ourselves as a hub for advanced research, given that we cannot compete with the US and China in large-scale manufacturing? Even if the British political establishment suddenly changes its mind. Some experts believe that there is no longer much that can be done to lessen the long-term effects of Brexit. According to Vicky Price, a former joint head of the UK's Government Economic Service, it's the UK that's dragged its feet on implementing the full Brexit deal, because we know that the logistical difficulties caused by the new paperwork and checks make life harder for British consumers and businesses. That works out well for the EU, because it allows it to criticize the UK for not contributing enough, while also outlining the balance of power in any upcoming negotiations. The UK is simply being harmed more by this than the EU, she continues. It's also unclear what could be at issue in those negotiations. On October 25, 2022, Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister of Britain, makes a speech in front of No. 10 Downing Street. The UK and a Changing Europe think tank's director, Anne Meenan, claims that there is remarkably little room for change in the UK-EU trade agreement. They would need to reach new agreements in certain areas, which would require more negotiations and giving in to Brussels, which no politician in the UK will even consider touching. One of the main arguments put forth by proponents of Brexit prior to the vote in 2016 was that a UK independent from the EU would be able to strike new trade deals and increase its economy's globalization and competitiveness. New trade agreements have been signed by the UK, most notably with Australia. However, even the government's own analyses predict that it won't significantly affect GDP. In contrast, the UK Office for Budget Responsibility, which develops economic projections for the government, anticipates that Brexit will result in a 4% decrease in British output over the next 15 years, compared to the case where it had remained a member of the EU. In the long run, exports and imports are anticipated to be about 15% lower. Truss attempted to implement supply-side changes by lowering business taxes. Sunak is attempting to achieve this by removing restrictions on UK banks and the services industry. Johnson's grand scheme involved making sizable investments in the underdeveloped regions of the UK in order to stimulate new economic activity. Liz Truss, the newly elected leader of the Conservative Party, is greeted by Queen Elizabeth II in the drawing room before being invited to become Prime Minister and form a new government on September 6, 2022 in Aberdeen, Scotland. Because every other country is trying to do exactly the same thing, says Lowe, there is a problem with reforming your way to competitiveness. Brexit still has a significant impact on UK politics, despite Boris Johnson's pledge to get Brexit done in the run-up to the 2019 election. Even though it may not have had a prominent role in the political drama of this year, it is constantly present as an unresolved side plot. It is unlikely that the UK will suddenly plunge off a cliff as a result of the effects of Brexit, because it is a slow-burning issue. But as time passes, more people are experiencing the negative effects of Brexit more frequently. Sunak and Starmer need to decide whether it is worth the risk to put off dealing with the effects of Brexit until after the next election, because there is a chance that things could drastically worsen in the 2 years prior to an election. And if that takes place, the general public might be left wondering why the nation's top politicians chose to bury their heads in the sand regarding what is arguably the most significant issue facing their nation right now.